Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the Championship podcast. As you can see, we've got no Ollie Man this week. It's due to a vet appointment, but I think it's any excuse to get out of talking about Sheffield United. But I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Jack Ward from the Jack Ward podcast and YouTube channel. Lovely to have you on, mate. Keeping well?
I am. I'm ready for football to begin again. I think I'm at that stage now where the first week we sort of go international break. That's a nice sort of breather. And then you get to that second week and you'll go, okay, right. I wanted to start again now. I think I'm at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Starts obviously with Middlesbrough against Ipswich on Friday night. What have you made of Middlesbrough? Had a brilliant start, obviously. Some goal scoring troubles in recent games, but overall, I think a lot of people were quite low on Middlesbrough before the start of the season, and I think a lot of people were probably quite surprised by quite how well they've started under Rob Edwards.
Yeah, I think I was probably underestimating them slightly. I think that's purely because we didn't quite know what Rob Edwards we were going to get. I think it's the manager situation and the stocks of managers are so fascinating, aren't they?
Sure.
I think when he left Luton, his stock was probably a lot lower than it was when he got them into the Premier League, for example. And then he goes and gets the Middlesbrough job after the Michael Carrick situation that at times looked really, really good. And then by the end, they felt like they were underperforming. So it was. And that's a great example of two managers there that the stocks were sort of flirting as the campaigns sort of progressed. And then he ended up at Middlesbrough. I think, like you say, on the whole, I think what I've really noticed is their focus on their defensive side of their game. I think they've been a lot better. You know, under Michael Carrick, they might score 6. They might also concede 3 in a game. And that was something that was really letting them down at times. And the Rob Edwards, they look a lot more assured at the back. And you can see that shift to a back 3. Whether or not that's something that he sticks with, I think I've seen in social media and reports that he might go, he might also go and adjust to about 4 if he needs to. But on the whole, whatever system he's played, they've looked a lot better at the back. However, like you say, at times they've maybe lacked that bit of creativity, which I think isn't the end of the world. They've still found ways to do it. We've seen a real variety of goals. The wing backs have been key in them in finding those goals. And the signing of Strelek's a really good number 9. Conway's scored a good number of goals so far this season as well. I'd like to maybe see a bit more consistency in that chance creation. Could they get a little bit more from those attacking 10s? You've got Aidan Morris and you've got Hayden Hackney there that I don't think are defensive midfielders. They do get involved going forward as well. Could we see a few more goal involvements for them? I think there's the early stages there of a really, really good side, and to sort of be saying that they're just getting going and there's still a lot more to come for a side that's currently second in the Championship, I think is really exciting. But vast improvements on the last couple of seasons. I think on the whole, Rob Edwards will be pretty happy with how he started.
Do you feel, Jack, looking at the table overall, that the championship table is yet to fully take shape? I mean, if you look at the top 6, for instance, you've got it's weird. I mean, probably the most fancied side is probably Coventry, currently top of the league, and Frank Lampard's doing an amazing job there. They look like a fantastic attacking team. We'll sort of come on to them in more detail. But actually, you could argue, we've spoken about Middlesbrough, who, although they've been in the conversation in recent years, they were a little bit, some people had them in the bottom half, I think, going into the season. And then you go for it. You go Preston, Stoke, and QPR. Nobody had them anywhere near the top 6 in their 1-24s, and even Leicester, although some people would have had them up there, they were probably the least fancied team out of the clubs coming down. Do you feel like we're yet to see the table take shape, or do you think what's there at the moment is similar to what's going to be there at the end of the season?
I think for Oxford's sake, I'm hoping so, Gab. But I think, although we'll come to that later, I'm sure, I think we were always going to be down there. So that's a half joke, half trying to pretend everything's going to be okay. But I think, yeah, at the top end of the table, like you say, I was speaking on my podcast with a good friend of mine. And actually, if you look at consistencies and teams that you sort of go, I'm sure, and we sort of had this joke all year about they're good, but are they good? Like, how good are they? Who actually is?
That's James Alcott stuff.
That's the James Alcott saying, and it's true. It's like they're good, but like, are they? What are they? I think that's something this does definitely relate to this current Championship table. I think Coventry are the only team where we can sit here and go, they look like a really strong, consistent side. There's a real settling feel around them. That starting 11's really strong. That everything has a lot of clarity behind it. I think that's sort of the key word so far this championship season, the word clarity. I think we're lacking that with a few of these teams, totally at not understanding exactly who they are and what they're looking to do. Like you say, Middlesbrough, I think, to be honest with you, although they have looked good and we've spoken about them, that defeat felt like it was coming. People might disagree with that, but I felt like they were sort of teetering towards a performance that might just not see them get something from the game. And of course, they went to Fratton Park, which is a very tricky place to go, and lost that one. And like I say, Leicester, I think they're a team that have, again, showed real glimpses. And there's been a lot of teams this season, that top end of the table. They've shown glimpses of quality. They've shown glimpses of a side that go, they're going to be up there. And we played them a few games ago, a few games before the international break, and we drew 2-2 with them, which on reflection, I think it's a really good result for Oxford. But, and you sort of, there were bits when I was watching my dad, and we looked at each other and went, yeah, that's a side that have just been in the Premier League. And then we sort of turn around and go, that's a side that are now back in the Championship, sort of struggling to totally understand what the best version of themselves are. And that's been the case for a lot of these teams. Really impressive Preston. A lot of people didn't have them as high as they've as high as they currently are. I did, I had them certainly down there. I think Paul Heckingbottom has done a fantastic job of rebuilding that side, and also bringing some more glamorous pieces to that Preston side. I think for a long time they've looked at that 11 and been a little bit, I don't know, underwhelmed by the look of it. I think there's a bit more of a flashy element to them. Thierry Smalling,
Divine looks like a great signing, doesn't he?
There's a bit of vibrancy, Gab, to be honest. That's what I'm getting from Preston. For a long time they've missed that. There's a bit of pizzazz about them, which I think is exciting. Similar with Stoke, actually, two teams in a similar position in that regard. And QPR, I think, have come on leaps and bounds over the last couple of weeks. You compare them to the side that lost 7-1 to Coventry, and there was always going to be sort of a few growing pains and transitional period with obviously the new manager Stefan coming into the football club. Now we're sort of seeing the signs of a good transfer window, some good pieces of recruitment, and a manager with a clear identity. And they've picked up some really good results sort of going into that last month and going into this international break. So that top six, it's probably not what people expected to see, but actually they have been the most, obviously, they've been the most consistent sides out of a very inconsistent division, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with QPR, by the way, I would look at Richard Kone and not Warren Burrell, he's a defender for Harrogate, Roman Burrell. Getting Burrell's mixed up there. Roman Burrell, because I think when he was at Burton Albion last season, he had a really good partnership with Jean Daddy Bodvashian, and I think he's a very good facilitator, Burrell. I think his movement is quite selfless, and he's quite good at creating chances for space for other players. And then you've got Richard Kone, he's a bit more goal oriented, and I think between them it's a real handful for defenders. And actually, you know what, I've kind of got to commend Julian Stefan for sort of going, you know what, we've got that athleticism and power at the top end of the pitch, why not use it? Because it's happened for last 3 seasons running, I think, for QPR, where going from the more idealistic style to a more let's cut teams open more incisively, that's been the key for them, and I think that's been the key for them this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw QPR when we drew 0-0 with them. That was our only clean sheet we've had this season, and I wasn't totally impressed with what they did in the final third. But actually, if you looked into the details of that game, they went with a bit more size over their sort of their width, if you like, with the people like Sato, who's a really, really exciting wide player. Like you said, they've got some really, really good skillful players, if you like. They actually went with a Michael Frey up there, which I think is certainly not someone you're going to get if you want that pace, or if you want that agility. And that's no disrespect to Michael Frey, because he did a job. He definitely helped the ball stick at times. It was sort of him looking around and thinking, right, where are these difference, these sort of game changers with that quality in the final third that he perhaps needed. So ironically, I didn't see the best of QPR in that game, but if you actually look at the whole of their season, they've looked a really, really good side going forward. And I think the signing of Richard Kone now looks like a really, really good one. I think he's someone that this season's impressed me. We sometimes don't know what you're going to get with a striker who sort of comes into the Championship for the first time, but he looks like he's adapted to that really, really well. He looks like that physical presence that we saw him at Wickham. He looks like someone that can play with his back to goal, someone that can play in behind, great finisher. He looks like a really, really good all-rounder and suits that sort of dynamic style of play that QPR are trying to adopt. So, yeah, QPR have impressed me, and their sort of improvement over a short amount of time, I think, has been really, really encouraging for them. And they're in sixth going into the international break. I think QPR fans have been crying out for that for a very long time.
Certainly have been. Yeah. I'm wondering, Wardy, I'd kind of like to look at teams sort of in the bottom half that are kind of underachieving. And the team, I wouldn't actually put Wrexham in this group. Some people might. I would actually say 18th for Wrexham for this season is actually okay, because they've had to evolve the squad to get to get to a squad that's competitive at this level, because the way they've built the squad in previous seasons, it's been very short-termist in terms of getting at that division, and they've not really had an awful lot of growth potential in the squad. So yes, they've spent 30 million, but it's actually been across 11 players, so and a 3 million player at Championship level isn't actually a huge amount. So yeah, that's kind of my argument for Wrexham. But I would look at Birmingham, Southampton, Norwich, all teams that a lot of people would have said Birmingham, Southampton, everyone had top six, and I think a lot of people would have had Norwich top six as well. Degree of underperformance there from those teams to different extents.
Yeah, big time on Norwich. Not convinced by them. And I mean, some people have been asking me whether or not I'm enjoying it because of Liam Manning being the manager there. I will be honest, that's not the case. Although what I will say, if I'm going to sort of link Liam Manning into sort of my feelings towards it, Liam Manning is someone that has usually has a very, very distinctive style of play. I think he's someone that you can see a Liam Manning side when you're watching one. Is it always, full throttle? No, he's someone that is certainly
it's quite conservative, isn't it? It's also, they use the ball carefully, and they won't be too aggressive out of the ball. That's how I would describe a
yeah. I'd sort of say they limit risks, Gab. I think that's sometimes a good way of describing it. I think they're very, very comfy in possession. I think they're a team that like to control games and control large aspects of games and be a bit intricate, be quite patient. And that was the same at Oxford. That was the same at Bristol City. And sometimes that frustrated Bristol City fans. At MK Dons, it was the same. And when it didn't work, it was, of course, very, very disappointing. And, of course, lost his job and they went down that season as well. At Norwich, I watched that game against Ipswich, of course, we probably all did. You just didn't really totally understand what that game plan was. I think in the first half, you could sort of see it. They were trying to understand that the bottom line is Ipswich have got better players, and that has to be noted. That you look at the quality and the squad quality on paper. Ipswich, of course, are much stronger, and you could sort of see that game plan was sort of nick possession, play in transition, try and turn over the ball in the middle of the pitch. Second half, when that game opened up a lot more and it sort of was very, very against what Norwich wanted it to be, with large spaces and those areas for these Ipswich players to attack, they looked very, very short of ideas. And in the final third, they lacked any kind of conviction. And I think throughout the entire season, we've seen that with Norwich. They just they haven't got clarity. There is a lot of new faces in there. Some have been a lot better than others. You look at Josh Sargent, a top striker at this level. He's not getting the service. He's not, they're not creating a lot of opportunities. And at the back, they're extremely leaky and quite error prone. And that comes with confidence as well. I think they're not sort of singing off the same hymn sheet. And that comes, unfortunately, down to the manager. I was quite surprised, and maybe we shouldn't be, with the way that managers come and go. I thought he probably was going to lose his job after the East Anglian derby. It looked as though Ben Napper, who is also under quite a lot of pressure at the moment, is looking to stick with his guy, which I understand because that was a big move anyway.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to explore with you, Jack, is and I think there's good arguments on either side with this, but is man management, has that become quite an underrated aspect of modern management? Because I feel like nowadays, coaches who have a very good coaching background and they're very technical in the way that they work, they've got a bit more space to do well than they might have done in a previous era, because coaching acumen and tactical and technical stuff counts for a bit more, maybe. But I still think that how effective your ideas are will depend to a certain extent about how well you're able to motivate players. And I'm looking at Liam Manning, and maybe even I would look at Will Still, and I would say, you've clearly got coaching acumen for the journey that you've been on. I don't think you have the career that either have had without that. But I would also wonder, can they really motivate players? And that would be a question that I would like to find the answer to.
Yeah, I think it's Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I think unless you are, this isn't going to help our conversation, but unless you are a player in that dressing room, you can't totally understand exactly what you're being fed and what information you're being fed and whether or not you can motivate a team. And I think you're right. He's always been a very, very reserved character. He's not somebody that speaks more than he needs to in interviews. He's not someone that is overly dramatic or animated on the touchline. He's not really that type of guy. And when it goes well, as fans, we are sometimes quite fickle. When it goes well, you sort of commend the
Oh, he's
calmness,
calm,
and
he's collected.
we love the calm persona. And then when we lose him, we want him to start, lobbing stuff. So
Yeah.
it's all about circumstances. It's all about the current feel. And if Norwich were top of the league, we'd be going sort of how much, how amazing is the fact that they're so calm and they're so patient with the way that the team almost mirrors the manager. They're intricate. They're composed. And sometimes you just actually, as fans, you want a manager to sort of give it some, especially when you lose a derby game. And in a derby game, even after a derby game which you lose, you want that manager to maybe give you something else. But yeah, it's really, really tricky. But he's never been that guy. And he's also someone that will never change. I don't
He
think
won't,
he is.
no.
He is someone that will always be that, reserved character. If you look at his time at Oxford, MK Dons, like I've mentioned, Bristol City, he's never been that. He's always been someone that has been very, very good and calm in the way that he answers questions. But like you say, when you're losing games of football and you're not performing, and when you're losing a game that you were unbeaten against your rivals for 16 years, for example, you do want your manager to maybe give you something else. Because as fans, we love passion because we're passionate. I think that's sort of the best way we can answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to look at the top and Frank Lampard and Coventry, Jack, because one of the reasons why that held me back from putting Coventry in my top two before the season was maybe, they've got a great best 11, but have they got enough depth to navigate the more difficult periods? I'm still not 100% converted on that. But one thing I would say is that I think they might be allowed to have a blip or two as a result of maybe not having so much squad depth, because Birmingham and Southampton, for instance, have given themselves so much to catch up on, because they've, they're on 11 points, 12 points, and a fair bit off the top already, albeit plenty of time for things to change. Whereas I look at Coventry and I actually wonder, could it be a benefit for Coventry to have a very stable squad and a closely knit group of players?
Again, I think you probably shape that perception based on what we're currently seeing. I think if you get a couple of injuries, we go back and we agree with your point, and you go, why did they not add a bit more? Where's that depth? If they lose a few more attackers, you look at your Sakamotos, you look at your Haji Wright, you look at Thomas Asante who's flying, Mason Clark, and you sort of lose two of them, and you're cut, and you're like, okay, where are we looking? How do we feel now going forward? Because they're the star players, and actually they're quite lucky. They've got star players from back to front at the moment. So if you lose anyone, not just the attackers, they could be in a bit of trouble. But when it's going well and you've played 9 games, you won 5 of them, you're winning games by sort of 5, 6 goals, not conceding many, and there is such a unity around them, you can shape that a different way and go, well, isn't it amazing that 11 is so consistent and everybody completely understands their role in the team? I'd say what I've really liked about Frank Lampard is that adaptability about him. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around Frank Lampard, actually. And I did a video on it on my channel. I sort of, instead of solely looking at the tactical side of things, I think what I've been really impressed by is that adaptability. I think the freedom that he allows these players to do. I think he's very, very good at just being like, I think there's sometimes we look at these ex-pros, it's so easy to go, when it doesn't work out, everyone goes, the reason why they didn't work is because they expect everyone to maybe be as good as they were as players. That seems to be what everyone sort of just naturally goes with if it doesn't
I've
work
probably
out.
been guilty of that as well with the Lampard conversation.
But actually, he's actually doing quite well at being like, okay, you're really good at that. And this sounds really basic, but I think it's true. You're really good at doing something like that. Let's play to your strengths a little bit. And we're seeing that with these individual pieces of quality that are right now absolutely flourishing. So I've been really, really impressed with Frank
Do
Lampard.
you
I
know
have.
what as well, Jack? I think Lampard plays to his own strengths as well. Because
Yeah,
I
sure.
one thing I've quite liked about his interviews is he's acknowledged that his coaches have different skills
Yeah.
to him, and I think so much of management is about that, about being able to accept that you're not good at everything. And so for Lampard, do I think he's a super technical coach? Maybe not. But actually, he's got Joe Edwards there, who is that. But Edwards maybe doesn't have the man management, the kind of aura that I think Lampard
Mhm.
has, where he's the type of guy where when he talks, you listen. And so if you've got Lampard pulling players in to have one-to-one chats and have a really good command of the dressing room, and then you've got Joe Edwards there, who's very strong on the specifics and the technicals, that's actually a lovely combination. So that's one thing that I've sort of definitely been converted on
I think
with
that
regard.
could actually be something that to briefly go back to. I think that's a great point. I think that's maybe where that Chris Hogg, Liam Manning dynamic is
Yes.
a bit of a problem
Mm.
potentially. You've got two very, very, and I don't know them personally, but from what I'm getting from them is they're quite similar. You've got
Mm.
two very, very calm, you know, I'm gonna guess I could be wrong, and I'm quite
Mm.
careful with how I say this. Maybe a slightly more introverted characters.
Yeah.
They might not be. Like I said, haven't been down to the pub with them. They might be great after a couple. But from what
Yeah.
I'm guessing, from what we see, they seem quite introverted characters, and maybe that sort of similar dynamic might be something that could sometimes hold them back. Like you say with Coventry, you've got the opposite. I think you've got two really, really good blends of character. And so I think that's maybe something to drop in there. I'm fascinated by
Mm.
sort of manager, coach, and staff dynamics on a personality level. I think that's
Yeah.
something that's really interesting.
Oh, I think it's such an important thing, Jack. Because I'm a big believer that you need a yin to the yang. Like I think
Mm,
every manager's flawed somewhere, and often what defines reigns is not necessarily their strengths, although that's a huge part of it as well. But actually, can they work around what their weaknesses are because they've got someone else who's strong in areas where
sure.
they're not, and vice versa. So I think we've hit on something really important there. I'm. How many of the teams currently in the top six, then, Jack, do you think are going to stay there? I mean, clearly, I think Coventry are. I think I'd probably go with Leicester at this point. We obviously think Ipswich are going to be in there. Are we looking at two or three teams that we think could
Yeah, I
become?
think the safe bets just go right in the middle. Let's say three.
Mm,
It's so this is the weirdest championship season I've sort
mm,
of looked at for quite a while. At this stage in a season, it's not how anybody thought it would be going, which is brilliant. But it's one of those where you don't, because there is very, very little consistency other than Coventry.
mm,
Knowing who's going to stay is you're your star. You say with Leicester, you're sort of, if you're making the argument that they do stay in the top six, you're saying that they're going to convert those draws into wins. That's
mm,
that's what you're presuming. You're presuming that those sort of tight games where they haven't been able to see off matches and those sort of little glimpses of quality turn into large periods of quality. You're presuming that happens and they finish in the top six. I'm not saying that I'm not saying this will happen, but it could easily be that they lose a few more of those games that they're currently drawing and they trickle
mm.
down the table and we have no idea again. But I think you're right. I think Leicester have got that quality in that squad that should have them in that top six at a bare minimum. Coventry, I've really enjoyed. Middlesbrough, I think, maybe slightly, ever so slightly overperforming in some
Mm.
aspects, but I
Yeah,
think are probably okay. And you don't. Preston and Stoke are doing a fantastic job, and so are QPR. But you then got
yeah,
those teams that you mentioned there. You've got three or four, maybe even five teams that aren't anywhere near that top six right now that we expect to be in there come the end of the season. So some have got
sure.
to go. They can't all finish in the top six.
And that's part of why I worry a little bit for teams. That they're in the bottom three right now. Well, Sheffield Wednesday, I think, are going to go. They've shown incredible spirit, and I really admire what Henrik Pedersen's doing. But I think it's going to be too much of an uphill battle for Sheffield Wednesday. I
Hmm.
hope I'm wrong. But then I certainly look at Sheffield United out to be only on 3 points at this stage. I think is dangerous, even with the quality that they've still got from last season. And certainly for Oxford, I'm concerned for yourselves
Brilliant.
because other than maybe Blackburn and Derby, I look at, you don't see a huge cluster of teams that are close to you in terms of points. So, if I'm Oxford, I'm looking at Hull, I'm looking at Portsmouth, and I'm looking at Charlton, but they're already 6 points above you. So
Yeah.
it's not like they're easily graspable within, a couple of weekends. So that's the difficulty, I think, in the situation that you've put yourselves in.
Yeah, it's not brilliant, is it? I mean, look, let's go with my positive head, and then we'll move on to my pessimistic side in a second. My positive side of my footballing brains here, which is probably the fan in me, is saying that at times this season, our performances have been a lot better than our results. I would say that. I'd say our games, if you look at them, a lot of them are very, very tight. And at the moment, it's individual mistakes, it's fine margins, it's those just really, really annoying elements that are letting us down. Which obviously, if you count them across an entire season, is well and truly enough to see us get relegated. And if you come out on the wrong end of fine margins once or twice, fine. You come out of them 10 times in a season, you're going to be in big trouble. And then that no longer is maybe a reason why you can potentially create an argument that you're going to be okay. I think if I'm going to again maybe give us a little bit of an excuse, or not an excuse, but maybe give a little bit of context. If you look at our games, they have been fairly challenging. Now, every game in the Championship's challenging. We played Leicester, we played Bristol City, we beat Bristol City, Sheffield United. Obviously, that's a bit of a, that's a bizarre one. QPR, we got a draw, lost to Watford, and actually everyone sort of goes, "Oh, that's a bad result." But actually, Watford were pretty good. They still sat their manager, but that seems to just be Watford. Leicester, Coventry, we've played and both got points against them. Birmingham, with yourself, we went there and lost 1-0, which maybe if you look at Birmingham and how they've started their season, is that, at the time, that sort of was one of those where you go, well, I think more teams will go to Birmingham and lose. But actually, maybe you look at that slightly differently now. The whole defeat was bad and the Pompey defeat was disappointing. But what you're getting from that is that at times we've gone away going, that's actually all right. That's actually okay. But the one win out of 9 is the reason why we're in that bottom 3.
So here's where I'm at, Jack. I'm very reluctant to say Oxford will go down because I've seen it, with my own eyes how good Gary Rowett is, and the numbers tell you over consistency of over a decade. He doesn't lose more than 3 championship games in a row. It's never happened for a Gary Rowett team.
Yeah, we haven't done it yet this season. So
exactly,
we're right.
And he's one of the best organisers I've come across at this level. And I think if you can organise teams, you're not going to lose many games, and you should be able to climb the table. However, I'm concerned that I think Rowett possibly feels that he's been underprepared in terms of recruitment, and I think he'd have liked 2 or 3 more. And I think that's a concern that I have, because it puts a lot of pressure on getting the right additions in January, which, by the way, is 3 months away. And the other point that I would make is maybe Cameron Brannigan starting the season slightly injured has possibly put you on the back foot as opposed to starting, all systems go. So there's, I've got a lot of belief in Gary Rowett there, and that's one of the things that I'm sort of clinging on to, but also a couple of reasons where I'm thinking there's a bit of concern there.
Yeah, I don't think it's been Cameron Brannigan. I think even Cameron Brannigan's best start to the season, I think even he'd admit that. I don't think he's maybe. It's been a weird season for Brannigan. I mean, he's just been appointed captain a couple of weeks ago. The Elliot Moore club captain departure happened on deadline day. That was a bit of a shock. And then he's now been given the captain. I think that was probably coming because when Elliot Moore hasn't played, he has been stepping up to captaincy duties. And at times this season, he just hasn't really been able to take games by the scruff of the neck. And sometimes that's what Brannigan, or a lot of the time, that's what Cameron Brannigan has done. I think Brian Kirschmacher is a really, really good midfielder, and he's been a big shining light in this Oxford United side this season. He's one of those where you sort of go, if we do go down, he won't be playing with us in League One. He looks like a cut above. He could play a lot higher than in a relegation battle in the Championship. He just looks like a really cultured midfielder. On the preparation side of it, I would agree with you to a certain extent. However, I'd say a bit more of the preparation argument comes down to our pre-season. because our
Oh,
pre-season,
that was being lofted,
yeah,
wasn't
it created
on an elephant.
the social media companies and the people on that make money through Twitter videos were loving it. Were Oxford United's preparation levels as good as they could be from that? No, I don't think so. And that was actually something that he has continued to mention. He is sort of on a number of occasions said that, and he has to be careful, and I have to be careful too, because we're owned by an Indonesian consortium. We're and it was the Indonesian President's Cup, so let's tread carefully.
Sure.
But it was obviously not something, and I think this is fair to say, not something that Gary Rowett maybe put forward as a suggestion. I don't think if he was creating his ideal pre-season, I think traveling halfway across the world and nearly the entire way across the world and spending the time where he'd love to be, I'd imagine, in Spain doing some hot weather training instead. He's in Bali playing against a wide range of Indonesian football clubs. I don't think that's what he totally had in mind. I think you could see that in the early stages of our season. We didn't look as fit. And Gary Rowett, and you look at his top 3 non-negotiables in a team, it is hard work, and that comes with extreme levels of fitness, total organisation. We're not a team that are going to dominate the ball. We're a team that are going to have to be really aggressive out of possession. A team that are going to have to be very, very hardworking, chasing, and I use that word carefully, but a lot of the time chasing the ball at points.
Yeah.
And I think that preparation or lack of preparation at the start of or during pre-season and trickling into the start of the season was a bit of a disappointment. Having said that, I think the last couple of, as we've sort of got into the season, that has slightly improved. But having said that, I thought our last game against Watford before the international break was woeful. I thought it was terrible. And that was, it's amazing, isn't it? How one game before an international break can totally change your perception going into 2 weeks without football. If we'd have got something out of that result, got something out of that in terms of result against Watford going into this 2-week break, I'd be having a very different conversation with you. But I am, there is naturally sort of, there's concerns there, but I do also sort of have a lot of trust still. Like I haven't lost that trust. So that's okay, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have trust in Rowett that I don't think you're going to fly off the radar under his watch. I think that's more likely to happen if the board did anything rash. I could see plummeting.
I don't think they will, Gab. I don't think they will. I don't think they will be rash. I will also say as well, the last point before I let you sort of go into that. We were always going to be down there, Gab. I think that's something that's really it's this sort of like surprise of everyone being like, oh, Oxford are bad, aren't they? Or Oxford aren't as good. It's like we were probably, if you looked at everyone's predictions, whether they sort of put it out there, I
said 19th, I think.
Yeah, which was probably the highest one. But everybody we're not. And I'm not sort of don't get your violins out for us. I'm not looking for a sympathy vote, but we are a very, very small fish in a very, very big pond.
Well, I mean, it's Oxford. You do like a bit of classical music over there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's we maybe because maybe violins might help us, but I just but actually, no, I think that the point is we were always going to be down there. We knew we were going to be in a dogfight. It's now right. Okay, no, we actually are in a dogfight, which is, expected. It's now about how we try and sort of navigate that. And I think if you want one manager to navigate a dogfight, if you look at all the managers in this league, I mean,
nobody
got
else
one, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also some positive news, by the way, just on that in terms of off the pitch, in terms of towards a new stadium, and some positive development on that, which just to balance out some of those concerns. So I'm kind of curious about how the dogfight's going to play out, because I'm most sure that Sheffield Wednesday are going to finish bottom. Could be wrong on that, but that's the judgment that I would make. But in terms of, I would worry a bit about Blackburn. I think they're probably outside the current bottom 3. They're probably would be the team that I would worry about the most.
I mean, I was thinking of doing a video on the dogfight, and I literally got down to sit and look at it, and I went, I don't actually know where because there isn't a cutoff. We're not at the cutoff stage yet, because you can actually sort of just go, You normally would go 17th and under. You're not putting
Yeah.
Southampton in there, are you? So,
Mm.
you then maybe have to go up a couple of places, miss a few teams out and go, maybe still Hull.
Yeah.
So it's one of that. We're not at that stage yet where you can
Well,
sort of
yeah,
look
at
at
this stage you
position
could say
downwards.
Preston could still get.
Yeah, exactly. We're 9
Yeah,
games in.
sure,
It sounds silly, but but with how tight it is, a team in
sure.
the top 6 loses 5 on the bounce, and suddenly they got the same number of points as a side that maybe win 2 or 3 that are already down there.
Sure.
It's as certainly as open as that. However, if you look at those candidates, you're definitely looking at Sheffield United. Unfortunately, I think we're in a position with Sheffield United where we're all sort of potentially saying to each other, is it a bad start? Is it a freak start? Or are they just quite bad? And actually, I think we're at the stage now where they probably have to be put in that conversation.
Agreed.
It's one of those where these horrendous starts can happen. We've seen it before. I know it wasn't quite the same, but with Luton last year, I think we all were sort of going into a Christmas. Yeah, well, I think they'll still be able to turn it around, and they didn't.
Mm.
So you've got to be honest, and you've got to look at the current situation. The numbers and the performances certainly don't lie. So Sheffield United have got a real job on their hands. Sheffield Wednesday, again, some difficult circumstances. I agree with your Blackburn point. I thought their transfer window was dire. To be honest, I thought it was so bad. There's still a lot of toxicity around that football club, and the
Yeah.
owners are certainly not helping that situation. Gested, the director of football, is also definitely not a popular figure.
Yeah.
It just, when you sort of get a feeling, you just sort of go, that's not nice. And I think that will
Do
eventually.
you know what it is, Jack? Their Blackburn Rovers have always had a but, and what I mean by that is they've been badly run as a club for a long time.
Sure.
But they've always had either a good manager, but they've got Tony Mowbray, but they've got John Eustace, or in other times, but they've got Adam Armstrong or Brereton Diaz
But they've got experience in that squad. It's like, you've got those reliable faces. They now haven't got any of those.
But yeah, exactly. So previously they've had these clinical goal scorers that have kind of bailed them out. Samis Modic's one season, whereas at the moment you wouldn't say that they've necessarily got that, and that's a worry for me with Blackburn Rovers. So yeah, I think Blackburn definitely have to be in this conversation.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. And I mean, it's tricky because then you sort of look at Derby and you go, they've only won 1 game. Which and everyone's sort of quite rightly questioning Oxford and there are other teams that have lost only won 1 game. Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United. The only difference is with Derby, they haven't lost as many. They've still managed to pick up 5 draws, which is why they're not in that bottom 3. But again, when I've seen Derby this season, at times I've sort of in the forward areas of the pitch, they're not quite there yet. I think they've got a lot of patience required with, Aguiman, who came in with a big fee. There's still an adjustment there. I think everybody on the whole feels like Derby will sort of make it work. Again, with your point you mentioned earlier, everyone sort of goes, well, they've got John Eustace though. So you've sort of got that, you've got that but, if you like, which I think is important. Norwich, again, very, very tricky. If they do they go, that quality of that squad shouldn't be anywhere near doubt. They've got a good squad. Is it maybe as good as a top 6 squad? I think a few people did have them in the top 6 at the start of the season.
Yeah.
They haven't shown that yet, but it's what happens with the manager. It's whether or not Liam Manning is the person that can make a change, or they make a change with him and in him leaving. That, again, such a confusing one.
Sure.
Wrexham have shown glimpses as well. Hull I've been really impressed with actually at times this season. They've been a bit surprising. So who is in that conversation? You sort of go, definitely both Sheffield clubs, Oxford, Blackburn, and then you're sort of looking around, you're going,
yeah,
I don't know who else, and that's just the bottom 4.
I think there'll be teams that come into the relegation equation sort of as the season goes on, that's for sure. Jack, pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know you're offering, you've got a brilliant offer in terms of subscriptions.
Yep.
For people who want to get a bit of bang for their buck and put the extra few quid in to support quality content. So just talk to us about what you can offer people.
Yeah, so I've just recently gone full time. Been doing this for I think 5 years. I think that's quite a long time, isn't it? 5 years as a bit of fun, but also a bit of fun that took quite a long time and has been a big part of my life. And then I made a decision to go full time and give it a go. So in terms of content output, there's a lot more of it because I've got a lot more time to sort of focus on what I love doing, and that's talking about football and breaking different bits and pieces down. So on my YouTube channel, on YouTube, the Jack Ward Football Podcast, still lots of content on there. We've just opened a memberships page on the YouTube channel where for £5.99 a month you are getting an exclusive video every single week, and you're also getting the video version of my roundup show on the Championship that's normally available exclusively on Spotify and audio platforms. We do film it, and if you sign up for that, you get that as a video version. So basically, 2 exclusive videos a week for just under £6 a month. I mean, I know I made that, but I think that's an absolute bargain. I mean, I'm gonna say that, aren't I? But I think it's all jokes aside, it's hopefully good stuff, and I'm very, very appreciative of everybody that watches my stuff, and I'm very appreciative of people like you, Gab, who have maybe pushed me into sort of being like, no, Jack, you can go and take a few risks and give it a go. So yeah, massive thank you to you and to everyone. I'm blown away by the support.
Top man, Jack. Well, really appreciate you making the time to come on the podcast. So thank
No
you so
worries,
much.
mate. Anytime.
Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Championship podcast, and we'll see you again very soon.